This is Rivarossi Heisler, and today I'm going to be trying to restore it. Before I start, I want to give this thing a test run. And I don't know how well you can see it, but I can tell that the front truck is not moving at all. It is stuck in place, and the rear truck is spinning, and we've got a working headlight. So I think there's something wrong with the linkage in the front truck. So I'll get to work. I've messed around with this thing a little bit, but I'm not entirely sure how to get it open, so this will be just a little bit of trial and error. Alright, I think that's about as far apart as I'm gonna get this thing. Luckily, I don't need to get much further into this engine, so I think this will be okay, but this is not as much as I'd like to get it apart. I'd like to go that extra step. I think there's something else hidden I can't find, and I don't really want to go destroying this thing since I don't really have to get inside. I can access the motor bearings from here, which is all I really care about. Alright, so I cleaned out this entire engine, well, at least the parts of it that are still right here, just without saying anything. I have also found the source of our problem before we get into that. This shaft here, as you can see, this one's got this little connector on it. This one doesn't. This connector just kind of slides off, so I'm going to glue this thing on off camera because it's not the most interesting thing, and I'd just rather get it out of our way. Alright, that part is now drying, and while we wait for that, I'm going to clean off the rest of the components that we have here. I'm going to start with these little plates, then I'm going to move on to this whole assembly, then this gear, and then these wheel sets. Alright, so everything here should be completely cleaned off. I was also checking, one of these sides is isolated. However, with the way these go in, it doesn't really matter. One of them's got to go in like this, and the other one's got to go in the other way, so Rivarossi made it nice and easy for us. So I think next up what I have to do is I want to give these motor bearings and whatnot some fresh oil, then I think we can start putting this stuff back together. Alright, after a lot of trial and error, I have now gotten this bit back in. What I did notice is that this was rather difficult to get in. I did so off camera, but this was a massive pain. I think getting this part in alone took about 20 minutes, which was not all that fun. So I think now all I really got left to do is I gotta put these parts on, I gotta put the wheels themselves back in and give this a little bit of fresh grease and oil. I gotta glue this back on because that fell off while I was working on this. Gotta find where the other one of these went, and then I think we can get this thing a test run. So after an excruciating amount of time, I have finally gotten all these drive shafts into place. All this bit of a Heisler is incredibly annoying to put back together, and I don't want to have to do that again. So I'm gonna really hope I don't have to take this thing apart again anytime soon. But I think before we put all this stuff back together, I want to see if I can get whatever other screws need to go back in place. I've got a couple of them around here. I know 2 of them are for basically like, what is it? 2 of them go to the covers for these trucks. I think I'm missing a few more, so I'm going to be hunting for screws next. Alright, I went in and I just replaced the screws with my own because I didn't like the screws that were in this thing in the first place, and they were being rather problematic. So now I think it's finally time to just give this thing some fresh grease and some fresh oil, and then we can go test it out. I would also like to note that these couplers, while they're not great, I'm going to be tweaking these off camera at some point if I get the thing to work well, which is why I'm kind of waiting. All it really requires is for me to take the covers back off and then just throw some new couplers on there. So it's not high priority to me, but it will be something I do at some point. Alright, I think that should be good to go. So now I think it's time for me to go glue some of these detail parts back on and go test the thing out. After a lengthy amount of work, it's now time for the moment of truth. Let me give this thing some power. And it appears to run perfectly fine, and it seems pretty quiet actually for one of these Heislers. Pretty smooth at a slower speed too. I also don't know if you noticed this, but this rear light actually does work. I'll see if I can run it forward enough. I'm not sure if it's coming across on camera, but this thing does have a functional rear light. It's on at all times, but it is cool. However, I do have 2 key takeaways from this video. One is that working on a Rivarossi Heisler is much harder and much more difficult than I would have expected. For note, I really don't ever want to have to take apart that whole cylinder thing ever again. That was a massive pain to put back together and took at least half an hour. And then the other thing is, I don't think it's really possible to fully take the shell off, which I was going to put DCC in this. However, I did get another Heisler of much more interest that I'm going to be working on in a future video that's actually brass. So stay tuned for that in the next Project Bin video.